Well, good afternoon and welcome to the homestead and welcome to this new season of Porch Talk. This is our spring 2025 Porch Talk. Excited to be able to take some time to share with you guys. So many things have happened in the world since we ended our last season back in May of 2024. Excited to go over some of those things over the next 10 weeks and excited to have a lot of feedback from those of you that have watched previously. We have a poll out on Facebook. It's still open. If you haven't had a chance to give your feedback, please take a moment and do that. And thank you to those of you that have. We're going to be looking at some of those topics and questions and that were there involving the poll. And today, as we get started, I want to really celebrate something that we have seen happen in our nation over this past month. We're really seeing a seismic shift back to family values, back to some of our traditional American values, even dating back as far back as the colonists who really founded this nation. And so it's just exciting to see what God is doing, to see what's at work. Is everything perfect? Are all the problems of the day solved? By no means. We're going to be taking a look at those as well, but also celebrating some of the good things that are happening. And if you look behind me, we've got one sheep that's in labor, Sadie, one of our favorites. She actually used to just be called Bad Sheep because she always got out, and she was such a problem before we went to the net fence, kind of the more what do they call it? Self-sustaining model. And so now she's a pretty good sheep. So she got a name. Her name's Sadie. She's kind of a black and white sheep. She looks like a little Holstein cow. And so who knows? Maybe we'll see some lambs pop out here later on in the episode. If you would also, just before, as we get started, as we dive into things, I would take a moment to ask for a favor from you. If you would take just a moment to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell if there's anything in this video that is helpful to you. Once you get to the end of the video, then we'd really appreciate you taking the time to do that. It tells the algorithm that the content is worth showing and worth putting into play and however it works on YouTube. And also, if you take a moment just to share this video to other social media, we would really like to get our subscribers up to 300 subscribers this year. We're currently at 263 subscribers, so don't have that far to go to get there. And so maybe you can make the difference and be the one to push us over 300 subscribers on our YouTube channel. All right, well, let's take just a few moments and talk about some of the big things that are happening here in America, here in Missouri, but also throughout the world, and how it affects us as believers, how it affects the way that we live, the decisions that we make, how we raise up our families. So the first thing that I want to take a look at is that the family has been underpinned as a foundation of society. And that's something that we've discussed previously, that historically, every civilization that has abandoned the basic family unit, so a man, a woman, and their children, doesn't mean everyone, there are people that are single that contribute to society. There are other situations, out there. So this is not just saying, if you don't conform to that exact standard, well, then you're not important. That's not at all what I'm saying. But just as far as the foundation of our society and culture, any civilization that has abandoned that basic building block as a foundation or a pillar of their culture has failed. And so it's encouraging to see now that an emphasis has been placed back upon the family unit as that foundation. We've seen that now there is legally, male and female. I think a lot of that politically was to do with sports, with guys dressing up as girls and being in girl sports and things like that. But also, it's just kind of establishing some clarity. Not to say that you can't have a differing view. I mean, I want to take a minute just carefully and humbly addressing this issue, freedom of speech is something that as Christians we ought to value a lot, because freedom of speech is what gives us the opportunity to share the truth of the gospel message. So you can't it's not a one-way street. We have to give dissenting views, differing views, people that see that issue differently the opportunity to make their case. And so I just want to be, kind of a word out to Christians to be careful, to not use this as a club to beat people with, but rather to be encouraged to say that that is a direction that our nation has chosen to go. And it's really a reversal from the course that we've been on for probably the last 25 to 30 years, maybe even 40 years. And so that's encouraging to see. Also, fiscal responsibility has all of a sudden become a major issue. We have seen really since the end of World War II, but especially in a huge acceleration over the last 20 years of the debt way outgrowing our gross domestic product, or GDP. And the reason why that's such a big deal is that the more debt we have, the more that we have to spend to service that debt, that takes money out of American pockets. That takes money out of your pocket and out of my pocket, in our ability to progress as a nation, and it lowers our standard, it degrades our standard of living over time. And so fiscal responsibility, even though we're not even close to being fiscally responsible yet, we've seen President Trump put together an Avengers or an all-star team of people, including, and particularly Elon Musk in this case, who's really has already identified $4 billion a day. And just take that in for a minute. $1 billion is 1,000 million dollars. Okay, and you think about how much $1 million is. So $1,000 million. So $4,000 million or $4 billion per day of complete waste of things, of government programs and different monies that are being spent that accomplish absolutely nothing. I mean, one of the big ones is the USAID. You may have seen that on the news, an organization that we spend $70 billion a year on, that does basically nothing. It just goes around to different countries and tells them about certain social values. I won't get too specific. I don't want to trigger the algorithm, but just kind of ridiculous things that most Americans would not even agree with, and spends money on I don't even know what to do that. So just one small example, and so that's exciting to see that. We are understanding that we can't just waste money, spend unlimited money on things. And that's a good lesson for us too, a good reminder that we need to be looking for wasteful spending in our own budgets. We need to be looking for areas that especially if you're someone that lives above your means. So if you're spending more than you make, you really need to look at how you can bring those things in line. And we've talked about that in the past. I'm going to dwell on that a lot. But the idea that as a nation we are understanding, that we cannot spend at the rate that we are currently spending. We're going to have to make some wiser choices and tighten our belts a little bit. And so it's exciting to see that occur. And if you don't know, the DOGE, or the Department of Government Efficiency, that name actually came from a blockchain, a layer 1 blockchain, the cryptocurrency space, that started off as a meme coin, so not a serious project, that has become an enormous project, issuing. I believe that miners are being paid out, I want to say, over $2 million a day in emissions. And so, it's turned into a big deal. And so excited to see those worlds collide, and excited to see innovation begin to be something that's prioritized and a part of that fiscal responsibility. And we'll talk about that more specifically in another episode. A lot of the changes that we are seeing too initially in these we'll call it the first 100 days of the new administration, is that blockchain, digital assets, cryptocurrencies, AI, all of those areas are being looked at very seriously. Now, why is that important? You might be saying, well, as a Christian, as a believer, why does that really impact me? Why does that matter? Well, for one, the way that we transact and the way that a medium of exchange or money has occurred over the past, let's say, since the American silver dollar, so maybe over the past 150 years, is coming to an end. We're even seeing it being called analog finance. So, if you are outside of the blockchain, if you are outside of Bitcoin and the digital assets, then you are considered to be in the analog finance world. And so that doesn't mean you're bad, doesn't mean you're wrong or anything like that. It just means that system has a lot of inefficiencies in it. I mean, just think about what you have to pay when you use a credit card to make a purchase. That company, that business is paying 3% of what they're taking in of revenue, which of course that means they have to raise their prices in order to take that fee in every time you make a purchase. And I think with American Express, it's 3.5%. It's even more than that. So, going to the blockchain, which is like a thousandth of a percent, and it's basically no cost for transactions, is an enormous improvement in efficiency. I mean, just think about, let's say that as a family you spend $50,000 a year. I know for a lot of you it's more than that, but let's just say $50,000 a year on expenses. That means that $1,500, $1,500 of what you're purchasing is just wasted in fees. And so exciting to see that become a part of things. Now, AI is a mixed bag. I spent several episodes last season talking about that. Go back and watch that. We're not going to spend a ton of time on AI, but AI is becoming not only the central issue in the trade war and a central issue in manufacturing, but it's also becoming a central issue in the American household. People are beginning to understand that there are more and more advanced, artificially intelligent, I'm not sure I'd call them life forms at this point. I don't think we're quite to that technological level, but have AI on everything. I mean, on your refrigerator, on your phone, on tablets, computers, your washing machine. All kinds of things that are there to hopefully assist us in being more efficient, accomplishing more. The free time, the little free time that we have, if you're a hardworking American, AI can handle tasks and do things that you don't have to. We've not gotten to a place where we've purchased one of these new do everything robots. We're a little bit unsure about that. Having an artificial robot walking around our house, but we have got one of those sweep and mop vacuums that sweeps and mops and goes around and does that, and it does a pretty good job. Sometimes I'm like, okay, we gotta improve this thing, but sweeping, mopping in our home, it takes a long time, and so that saves us time. So that's going to be more and more a central issue, and this administration is, and not really this administration as much as it's just culturally, we are moving to that type of situation in agriculture and in so many ways. And I'm not talking about big ag, I'm talking about small ag. It's actually more of a benefit for somebody like me that's, it's just my family that manages this farm. And so if we can deploy drones, and I've got a new tractor. If you're kind of looking around like, I think this tractor looks different. It is. It's a newer tractor. It's a lot more sophisticated, has a lot more features and things that make brush hogging and different tasks that we do here on the farm much faster. And that's just like money in your pocket. That's more free time with your family. That's more free time to pursue other things. And so that's gonna be a huge change, and particularly in the workforce. Obviously, automation has been an issue for decades, but we are seeing an acceleration of that now. The problem with robotics has always been that they lack the control, the intelligence, the ability to make decisions. That's really been the issue that we've had in the past, and those issues are now being solved, and we have very competent robotic AIs that can perform a lot of tasks, and so that is going to create a massive shift in the workforce, and it probably is going to usher in UBI, or universal basic income, at least for a season, because so many people are going to be displaced, and that it just takes time to learn new things. And so if your job is replaced by AI, then it's going to be hard to learn a new trade, learn a new skill, and so there's going to be some struggles with that. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Secure borders, obviously, you'd have to live in a cave to not understand how controversial this has been. But for wherever you stand on the issue, the line has been drawn in the sand. We are going to have a country with borders, and so that's become a big thing. And that's really going to especially if you are an immigrant and you are here legally and you went through the process, the expensive process and the time-consuming process to become an American citizen, you are really going to benefit greatly from the criminals and other people that are here illegally being removed. It's going to give you more job opportunities, education opportunities, opportunities to move up in your career, and so that's very, very exciting. And I think while certainly I don't want to come off as anti-immigration. For me personally, I'm all for immigration. It just has to be done in a legal and orderly way, so that there's not a huge burden on taxpayers, as well as letting people in that are terrorists and murderers and people that we would not want as neighbors in our country. So a lot of big things there, and I think along those lines, there during COVID especially, there was a big question that came up in our culture: is crime really okay? Are police bad? And is crime really okay? Is crime just another lifestyle choice? For many that just sounds ridiculous, but it was a real conversation and a real dilemma that has been going on for the last 4 or 5 years. And I think we basically have said as a nation that police do matter. We do need police. Crime is not okay. Crime is not a good lifestyle choice. It's not the kind of lifestyle that we want to have. And if you have been a victim in some way, either as a small business that's been driven out because of crime, or if you're an individual who's been a victim of crime, that obviously you have a pretty strong opinion on that. But for all of it, it should matter to all of us, and so it's good that law and order has been upheld. And really, to a greater extent, what we've said is that we're no longer interested in mob rule. We're not interested in what the majority thinks, and we're not interested in what seems right to a small group of people either, but rather there is rule of law. We have laws for a reason. Those laws are there to protect us. They're based off of Roman common law, which is based off of the Bible. And even if you're not a Christian, you generally like the idea of some level of morality, at least, and some laws. Now, we keep hearing the D word, democracy. People don't understand what it is, and that's okay. But the idea of the Republican rule of law has been upheld. And so as the pendulum has swung more for probably the last 50 years towards the Democratic ideology, which we know historically always ends in anarchy or dictatorship, we have swung that pendulum back more to the libertarian side, to the idea that every American has the right to the pursuit of happiness and life and liberty, and that the Republican form of government, or the Republic, is the correct way and the best way that we can live in peace with one another, which of course is rule of law. So it's good to see that there's been a big shift that's been challenged. We've seen the negative impact of that, and now we're moving back. And that is fantastic for the church, because it lets the church begin to be able to do its ministry once again in a safe and cohesive and semi-predictable environment, and gives the opportunity for the gospel message to be shared in a free and natural way. All right, education. Education, of course, yesterday was a big deal. Elon Musk and others are wanting to reform education, and I've got to be really very careful here when I talk about education. It is, at least in my world, it's a hot topic. I think that the best thing to do is perhaps look at a biblical view of education. We want to have, as parents who have authority for what they teach their children, we want parents to have the opportunity to have input and to have the values taught that they believe in. And so the best way for that to happen is, rather than at the federal level decisions being made, at the more local level decisions are being made. That also saves a lot of cost, because now you don't have to pay a lot of federal people to come up with things. And so, regardless of where you are, whether you're pro public school, pro private school, pro homeschool, pro whatever school, the idea that a parent would have more control over or input into or involvement with their child's education, I think is a very positive thing. And is a biblical thing. And we're seeing that shift now. We're seeing that movement back. And I think that's a very positive thing. And I think that it's going to be, even though there's a lot of things to be figured out there, and so this might not necessarily fit in the what's going good category, because I know there are some struggles with that. I think the direction is generally positive. And yeah, I mean, I know that if you're an employee at the federal level and you've been working on the big programs and the big tests and those kind of things, I hopefully they can find a place at the more local level to be involved in education. And I certainly like to see those federal dollars come to our state and to our local schools. So I think that is going to be a really positive thing as well. And then lastly, one of the really positive trends and things that I've seen over the last 9 months is that preparedness is now the norm. Rather than it being weird or a subculture or people not even knowing what it is and even heard that word before, now preparedness is the norm. People understand that the supply chain is fragile. They understand that the trade wars, the big thing that's come up, we're going to talk about that in a little while, but they understand that trade wars even affect supplies, and bird flu and all this other stuff. I don't know what's real and what's manufactured, but what I do know is that when I went to Apple Market in Ozark the other day, there weren't a whole lot of eggs left in there, especially what I would call real eggs, right? Eggs that didn't come from a chicken farm where everyone's pumped with antibiotics and hormones and that has maybe an USDA certified organic, or it's just a good small little farm like ours that has you see the chicken coop right behind me. We go out in the morning, that little building with the maroon roof back there. We go out there in the morning, we get some eggs, and if it's hatching season, Stephanie's been hatching a lot of chicks here lately. If you're looking to buy some chicks, you can talk with her about that. But we've been hatching chicks. We're not hatching them, we're eating them and making scrambled eggs for breakfast. Those kind of eggs are in short supply. So we know that those things happen. Of course, we've had all kinds of runs on all kinds of things over the last 5 years. So we know that being prepared is just a good thing. It's just a good biblical thing that everyone should do. You should have storage for food. You should have a way to protect yourself if law enforcement can't get to you quickly. You should have a way to have some backup heat and power and different things. So we know that. And it's exciting to see that our culture is placing an emphasis on that. Our governments are placing an emphasis on that. And that people are beginning to place an emphasis on that and understand that living paycheck to paycheck and just eating food till you have nothing in the cupboard except for a third of a box of soggy Cheerios is not a good way to live. That we need to have that surplus in good times, and to have those commodities and things stored up so that when things get tough, whatever the scenario is, whether it's a major scenario, minor scenario, that you're not the one that's crowding the store, or running to the store in a panic before the storm, before the hurricane or whatever it is, trying to get all the resources gathered up. And that means that somebody is gonna, it's like musical chairs, someone is not going to have a chair to sit in. So if you're prepared, and whenever a calamity comes, you're not going to the store because you don't need to, well, then that in a way is helping that person who foolishly was unprepared. But also, we should show some grace. There should be some mercy, and we should be a help, even to people that don't deserve it. We should be a help, and that's what Christ has commanded us to do. And so that gives that ability for us to do that and to help those in need, because we're able to stand firm and secure in those times of uncertainty. So a lot of great things. There's obviously a lot more going on, and we'll be looking at some different topics. But I wanted to just take a moment and just celebrate some of the positive things and trends. It's easy, especially if you are if you have a high standard of morality, it's easy to always look at the negative and see what's going wrong, see corruption and the consequences of sin. It's easy to dwell on those things, and sometimes we forget the blessings. We forget the fact that we have a strong military that is protecting us. I'm able to sit here on a beautiful farm. Not such a beautiful day. It's a little cold and rainy. That's all right. But to be able to sit here in peace, not having to hold a rifle, or be wondering, whether or not there's an army going to come over the hill over there and take my farm from me and kill my family. So there are a lot of things to celebrate. Is life perfect? Is everything solved? No, but the opportunities are coming back to Americans, and I'm just excited to see what happens over this next season of time, just to see where things go. So what are some of the challenges then? And I want to actually take a little bit of time and look at the prophet Isaiah. In fact, if you have a Bible with you, if you would want to start turning to Isaiah chapter 7, we're actually going to read, if you make it through this video, we're going to read through the whole chapter of Isaiah. And we're going to take a look, because the prophet Isaiah has a lot to say about a godly nation, an ungodly nation, what happens in those times when godliness flourishes and the time when evil flourishes. And we're going to be taking a look at that today. And so it's going to be kind of a big part of our theme. You might have seen that in the title, Babylon is Burning. You might have maybe guessed that there'd be, that was a little bit of there's always a hint in the title. I always like to have a title for people to try to figure out. So that's where we're going to be heading. But I want to there are really 6 challenges that I've identified as kind of praying through where we are as a nation, where we are as families, where we are as churches, where our churches are in terms of their ministries and them being a lighthouse in a dark place. I want to identify those to be thinking about, because as I try to listen and understand the needs of our culture, the needs of our church families. I've got 5 kids; they're all adults now. Many of them have their own kids and are raising their own families. And so I began to learn once again, now that I'm not a young man anymore, what the challenges of being a young man and a young woman and raising young children in a family, and beginning to be reminded of those challenges and those needs. And so the first thing that I think is really a challenge, that continues to be a challenge, is high inflation. And what does high inflation mean? Well, high inflation means that the cost for you to basically live your life is rising faster than what your wage is raising. That's really an oversimplification, but as far as it pertains to us, that is what matters. So, and that's discouraging, because you might be excelling in your job and you may be working harder than ever and more hours than ever, but being able to have less and purchase less and save less, give less. And so that's discouraging, in terms of, we might be giving more dollars, but less value, because as we know, the dollar has been declining, has lost over 99% of its value since it came into being. Fiat currency is never a good investment. It never has been a good investment. It's good for a short-term medium exchange, and that is it. And while you hold it in your hand or while it sits in the bank, it is actually losing value every second. So that's tough. And if the rate of inflation is too high consistently over time, like it has been for the last 4 years, then it has a crushing feeling. And so I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that, because I think there are a lot of hardworking families out there that are feeling discouraged and want to give up. And they just think, it's just not worth it. No matter how hard I work, no matter what I do, I just can't seem to get ahead. I can't seem to own a home. I can't seem to have those basic things that my parents had and my grandparents had. And so that's a challenge, and that needs to be addressed. And I would contend that inflation is a moral evil, because inflation is really a hidden tax, either intentional or unintentional, placed upon you by those that are in charge of the money, which is right now kind of this group of organizations like the Federal Reserve, the U.S. government, the U.S. Treasury, the SEC, the CFTC, all of these different organizations kind of work together. And I guess the executive branch in Congress to some extent, well, the Congress to a large extent, they can control the monetary supply, and they control what's happening with inflation. And so that is somewhat of a moral evil, and it does need to be challenged, and it does need to be dealt with. And it's very difficult because we can all point fingers and state what's to blame. Obviously, reducing government spending, that's going to help, but there are so many more things at work there that need to be addressed. And so that's an area that is an area of struggle. I want to just identify that so that maybe you can just take a deep breath and say, okay, it's not it could be your fault. You could be making poor financial decisions. You could be overspending. You could be taking on too much debt. So in that case, that is on you. But for those for the many that are choosing to invest their money wisely and that they are good stewards, just take a deep breath and realize that you are probably in the most challenging economic system. Well, not probably, statistically, in terms of what the dollar can purchase. You are in the worst economic situation since the Great Depression, because we basically have a debt or a default on our debt through inflation, and so you are the person that is feeling that the most. Not that my generation or older generations are not. But we had the opportunity to produce wealth and build wealth and to build assets in a time, in more of a golden age type of time, where that was so much more easier to do. I mean, even when I was a teenager and minimum wage was $3.75, that $3.75 went a long way compared to whatever minimum wage is now. The second thing that I want to identify is the lower standard of living. That it is more difficult, that more and more young people are being forced into renting. They're being forced into having, not having land or the ability to grow their own food, or to have a homestead, or to do travel and do things that they would like to do, participate in events, give to their local churches and not-for-profits at the level that they want to. Because they're just trying to do the basic things. They're just trying to get food on the table. Insurance this year has just gone up enormous. I mean, it is just absolutely enormous. And we can say, well, it's wildfires, it's tornadoes, hurricanes. Well, we had all those things before, and we didn't see this level of rise in cost. So I think that really that's it's still primarily an inflationary challenge. And so that's the second thing. Third thing, and I mentioned this a little bit either, we are seeing a dramatic shift in the workforce. And we mentioned, robotics and AI obviously being a big part of that. But even beyond that, the idea that you could go to school, get decent grades, go to college, get a 4-year degree in something, and then get a job with that degree, that has went from being the norm to having a lot of problems. First of all, the cost of education has gotten so high that even in very professional classes of employment, like in law or medicine, that your cost, if you've got a $500,000 plus debt to pay back for school, that is very difficult, even at as a high wage earner. And because the interest rate on that money is higher and higher, that is becoming very difficult to do. And if let's say that maybe you only took out $50,000 of debt to get your 4-year degree, the degree is not valued like it was at a different time. That people are beginning to realize that having a piece of paper that says you're good at doing something, which I have a lot of those, it doesn't mean that I am good at doing any of those things, but demonstrating that you have those skills is a higher value. So we're seeing a pretty big shift there, that Amazon just wants to hire people that show up, are dependable, that can get product moved around and out the door, and they'll pay a premium price if you can do that. So it's less about how you look on paper, and it's more important how you can actually perform and how dependable you are, and your character, and that's actually in and of itself a very positive thing. But it's causing a generation of people that have grown up being able to do subpar work in school, subpar work at their job, just being a subpar human being, to having to change. And so that can be a pretty hard thing, and it can be hard as a parent and as a young advising young adults to know what to do. Should I go to college? Should I just get involved in a career? Should I learn a skill? Should I get involved in business and investing and start my own business? Should I work for someone else? And so, all those things, those are a lot of big questions, and those are questions that are age old, but at the rate that things are changing, it's really hard to know where to invest your time, yourself, and where to invest what little money that you have at that young age to educate yourself or to learn a skill. It's becoming very muddy. It's becoming a very different environment than what it's been over the last number of decades, and so that's a challenge there. Now we really have what I would. There are people that argue we World War III has started. We're off and going. Other people are saying, or have their head in the sand, and say, oh, I don't even follow the news. I don't even know what wars are being fought. I think we're probably somewhere right in the middle of that. We do have wars going all over the globe. We have a major war in the Middle East, major war in Eastern Europe, major wars in Africa. There are just a lot of things going on. Of course, you can talk about other less violent wars, at the border and different things. But there's a lot of global fighting. I mean, over 1 million people have been killed. Just Russians have been killed during the invasion of Ukraine. Of course, lots of Ukrainians have been killed as well. For every 1 million soldiers that have been killed, there are probably 2 million civilians that have been killed. It's just a terrible, that's a lot of people, guys. I mean, I realize that sometimes you start talking about these high numbers and it's just a number, but that's a lot of people. And that's just in one of those theaters of war. I don't know what the statistics are with the war in the Middle East. So I'm going to call it World War III mini, that we have this global war that a lot of different countries are involved in. There's not this major epic, just two main groups that have banded together to kind of fight like in World War I and II. But there is a lot of fighting. There is a lot of war, and that what that tells us is that there's a breakdown in communication, there's a breakdown in negotiation, there's a breakdown in countries able to communicate and work together, either because of cultural differences, religious differences, economic differences, poor leadership. There's just a lot of things happening there. And I'm not saying being involved in war means you're a poor leader. Sometimes you have to be involved in a war to protect your population, to protect your families. But I think generally avoiding war is the goal. Ronald Reagan said, what was it? Speak softly and carry a big stick. I think, that's a good biblical perspective. We should always pursue peace with one another. War is something that we do when we just cannot solve it. But right now, a lot of these conflicts are happening because there is a breakdown in communication, or breakdown in the world being able to resolve the dramatic changes that are happening technologically, and the information. One of the things that we still, I don't think many of us understand it, that going from a culture that I grew up in, where information was found in an encyclopedia, and if you didn't have an encyclopedia, you weren't going to generally find out 98% of what there is to know in the world. All of a sudden, billions of people now, billions with a B, have access to education and information about everything. So all of a sudden you live in a third world country and in a dictatorship, and you don't know any better, and it seems like everything's fine. You're paying 60% tax and you have socialized medicine. Now all of a sudden there's an internet, and even though your government's tried to block that information the best that they can, you get to experience and understand that there is a vast world of different political and religious and social information out there, and that is going to create some major civil unrest, and of course we've seen that since the 1990s, and we've seen that dramatic shift. And so now we in 2025 are seeing the results of that information exchange. And so there's a lot of positive with that, there's a lot of negative with that, but it's a major challenge. Trade wars are, this is our fifth challenge. Trade wars are something that have been off and on. There's been tariffs in the past. Let's look at the positive first. The positive thing about tariffs is that it gives Americans an opportunity for jobs in manufacturing and fair trade throughout the world. Tariffs also can be a way to eliminate or reduce the income tax and even sales tax and real estate tax and all the taxes that we pay. America is one of the highest tax countries in the world. And so to be able to shift some of that tax burden to tariffs, here's what that does. So you might say, well, it doesn't really help anything because now we have to pay more for foreign products. Well, buy local products. Okay, so then you don't pay any tariff on it. But then also too, that's fine. Just buy less foreign products. I know there's just things you can't buy in America because we don't make a lot. We don't make most things anymore, sadly. But you can buy less of those things. You've paid your tax already on the things that you did buy. And then now you're going to pay less income tax. So there's a lot of positives. Now, in the short term, did the stock market like it? Did the financial markets like it? No, they did not like that at all. Bitcoin hits a new all-time high. Trade war comes out, back down to 100K. So, same for the S&P's down, NASDAQ's down. Markets don't like that uncertainty of the trade war. So yeah, there is some short-term pain, but I think a long-term gain if we can stay the course. Now that's the big question because, we started down this path 8 years ago and we didn't quite make it. So that remains to be seen, but a lot of uncertainty with that. And that just creates more scarcity too, and one more reason to make preparedness a priority, and that is not a bad thing. In fact, if I to maybe over spiritualize the situation a little bit, I think that a lot of these kind of tremors that we've been seeing, things like the cocoa, the C word that you can't say on YouTube, the trade wars, just different things that have happened, wars that have broken out, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I think those that have been these little kind of like, oh, hey, Americans, Christians, it's time to be a little more prepared. It's time to have some money in savings. It's time to have some supplies set back because when the earthquake, if and when an earthquake hits, then you're going to hope that you've learned some important things about being more self-sufficient, about being able to feed yourself, about being able to have supplies and things, and having stores of value that can't just be inflated into toilet paper overnight. So it's really important, no pun with the shortage on, well, I guess pun intended with the shortage of toilet paper. So those are things, that's a fifth challenge that we've got to look at. And then lastly, civil unrest. Civil unrest, has really shifted from libertarians being the ones saying, hey, we're not taking this anymore. And now, we're seeing state, I think you call them state troops, but a lot of law enforcement with other agencies coming into California and other liberal places that do not like these, all the positives that I talked about at the beginning of the video. They see those as a threat. They do not like those shifts, those changes, and they are fighting back, and they are not liking that. And so we've got to figure out a way, and I'm trying to do better at this myself because I am a little bit of a draw a line in the sand. I'm going to do what's right. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And I think those are good things. That's a good thing. I mean, it's a biblical thing for you and your house to serve the Lord. But I need to do better at having a conversation with people that believe differently than me, that see things differently than me, that want to live a different lifestyle than me. I need to do better at listening and understanding and communicating with them rather than just going to war. And I think this is really a good lesson for us. And we're gonna look here at Isaiah in just a moment to, I think, get even some more understanding for this. But war should not just be and I'm talking about now personally. We shouldn't just go to war with people that are different from us. We should try to win them over. Jesus didn't just go around calling down hellfire and brimstone from heaven on people. There's only one minor incident with and I shouldn't say it's a minor incident, but it was the exception rather than the rule that Jesus used violence to solve anything. Generally, he was a meek, kind, gentle, thoughtful, polite human being who spoke he carried the ultimately big stick, but he spoke very softly, and he spoke truth in the it was up to those that were the listeners to respond to that truth. And so he did not usher in a violent revolution. He didn't raise an army. He didn't use his supernatural power to destroy his enemies. And so if he did not, and he has said, you need to be like me, because he is like God, he's like the Father. So then we ought to respond to that. We ought to understand that peacemaking is a major, major priority in our lives with our coworkers and with others. And so while we can't give into, we can't compromise. I'm not by any means suggesting that we do that, but we've got to find a way to do better at having a dialogue, at listening and trying to understand and being able to work together with our neighbors and people that see things differently than we do. Because that building a bridge, and that, I know that obviously I'm not a Democrat, but that's something they talk about a lot. And, actually they're right on that one point, that we do need to be building bridges towards one another, between countries. So that is something that we need to do. Bridges are a very important part of the infrastructure in our country because they connect land masses and places that are unreachable otherwise. And so that's a good lesson for us to be challenged with today. So what does God have to say to us about some of these things? Obviously, we can't look at the biblical case for everything that we've discussed kind of in this world events overview. But I would like to take just a moment and look at Isaiah chapter 7. And what we have here, just to kind of set the scene, is we have Isaiah, who is a prophet or an oracle, someone who had foreknowledge of events to come, but also spiritual knowledge of things that are. And in this time period, you had a nation, the nation of Israel, that had gone from being nomads in the desert to becoming a powerful nation with an army and territory and wealth and riches, and some of the greatest kings that have ever existed and leaders that have ever existed in humanity and in antiquity. And so what we have now is Isaiah is giving a slew, many. Isaiah is a very large book, one of our larger books, especially in the Old Testament, or of the Old Testament, and it gives overview of things that have happened, that are happening, and will happen, and the consequences of turning away from what is right, from turning away from the Lord, the rewards from being faithful, and how God deals with humanity. Because that's a big question. I know a lot of Christians don't understand why Christ is waiting so long to return. They don't understand why, if they're living a godly life and they have strife and struggle and loss and terror in their lives, how can God, doesn't God take care of his own people? And why does God let this evil person over here appear to be thriving and everything going well in their life? And so there's a lot of questions, and it's caused a lot of people to turn away from the faith. So let's just take a few moments and examine that. In this particular case, what's happening is that Israel is warning, or Isaiah is warning Israel, that because of your unfaithfulness, because you have turned away from God's law, you've turned away from his commandments, and you have basically said, no, I don't want your protection, God. I'm going to go off and do my own thing. He is going to allow the nation of Babylon to come and destroy you. That's what several of the first chapters deal with, and also Assyria, although in this chapter we're dealing, I think, primarily with Babylon. And Babylon was, just to give a little bit of historical background, we hear these terms, and if you're not interested in biblical history or just history in general, I understand it's like, okay, whatever, Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylons, Babylonians, whatever, I don't care, but it does matter. And Babylon is kind of a big deal, because Babylon is one of the original civilizations, ruled by, their first ruler was Nimrod. We see the account in Genesis and the flood. We also see in the ancient Sumerian stone tablets, we see references to Babylon, to Nimrod, also to Abram, to the king of Ararat, which was, of course, Noah. That's where the ark landed. And so we see a lot of non-biblical historical references. And so this early civilization was one of the first civilizations, probably, we know coming from the three sons of Noah, and probably Babylon particularly, whenever Cain went to and knew his wife, he went to another place. I think it was the land of Nod or wherever it was. We know that there were these spiritual beings, probably the angels that were cast out of heaven, that were on the earth, and there's arguments about all of that, but this culture, this civilization was not supportive of God's laws. They were in direct rebellion against God, and they created civilization. Of course, before even Babylon became a civilization, the people tried to build a tower to God, and all kinds of things that God directly said, do not do this, do not settle in one place, do not congregate in one place, do not build towers and altars and things like that. Worship the one true God. Well, they rejected all of this. So they have been a nation against God's people from the beginning. All right, that's the takeaway. That's the point. If you're not as interested in the historical stuff, that's fine. But understanding that Cush, Babylon, Egypt, some of those early civilizations, many turned their back against God's plan, his purposes, and so God is going to now allow his enemy, right, the enemy that has rejected him, to come and crush Israel, who has basically become God's enemy now. And so he's warned Israel. Of course, there were lots of warnings. Israel did not heed those warnings. They got crushed by Babylon, crushed by Assyria, had a series of wars that, had their own civil war, were split into two kingdoms. And so this is part of what Isaiah prophesied. But then he also prophesied, and here's kind of where I'm drawing some parallels with where we are today with this seismic shift here in America, is that we have spent a season rejecting God. We have created our own gods. We have created our own laws. We've worshipped the creation rather than the Creator. We've murdered. We've lied. We've basically done everything. I'm not saying everyone, but generally as a culture, we have murdered millions of unborn people. The atrocities the United States has committed are significant. All right, and I'm proud to be an American, right? I'm a true patriot in all the things, but I also know that our nation has spent a season, probably from about 1945, 46 up till now, for the last 80 years, walking away from God. And so I am hopeful in this moment that there is at least some slight rays of sunshine coming through a cloudy day like this, saying that there are some signs that that people are turning back. They're going back to understand that being away and outside of God's protection is not a good thing. It has not been good for our families. It's not been good for our standard of living. It's not been good for the gospel message. Although the light does shine brightest when it's dark. So I guess in that sense, it has been good. But there have been so many things that have happened where we have turned our backs on God. And so in this chapter, we see now God giving hopes, promising that there will be a time when Babylon is punished for what they've done. So let's read it together. An oracle against Babylon that Isaiah son of Amoz saw. Lift up a banner on a barren mountain. Call out to them. Wave your hand, and they will go through the gates of the nobles. I have commanded my chosen ones. I have also called my warriors, who exult in my triumph, to execute my wrath. Listen, a tumult on the mountains, like that of a mighty people. Listen, an uproar among the kingdoms, like nations being gathered together. The Lord of hosts is mobilizing an army of war. And of course, we see capital H for hosts, so we know that it's referring to the Lord, that he is raising an army for war. They are coming from a far land, from the distant horizon, the Lord and the weapons of his wrath, to destroy the whole country. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come like destruction from the Almighty. Therefore, everyone's hands will become weak, and every man's heart will melt. They will be horrified. Pain and agony will seize them. They will be in anguish like a woman in labor. They will look at each other, their faces flushed with fear. Look, the day of the Lord is coming, cruel with rage and burning anger, to make the earth a desolation and to destroy the sinners on it. And so here we even see what I believe is a parallel prophecy dealing with the end times, in the time when Christ returns and he brings judgment upon earth and upon sinners and upon those who have rejected his laws ultimately. Now, so we kind of have different things happening here, but I think that those set of verses there are dealing with even that later on, ultimately, as Christ returns. Indeed, the stars of the sky and its constellations will not give their light, and the sun will be dark when it rises, and the moon will not shine. And I will bring disaster on the world and their own iniquity on the wicked. Iniquity is really a synonym for sin. There are some subtle differences, but for our purposes today, it's talking about sin, doing those that do evil. I will bring disaster on the world, and I will put an end to the pride of the arrogant, and humiliate the insolence of tyrants. I will make man scarcer than gold, and mankind more rare than the gold of Ophir. And therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will shake from its foundations at the wrath of the Lord of hosts, on the day of his burning anger, like wandering gazelles, and like sheep without a shepherd. Each one will turn to his own people, and each one will flee to his own land. And whoever is found will be stabbed, and whoever is caught will die by the sword. And now there is a verse 16 I'm not going to read out loud because it would turn this PG video into a rated R video, and so I know that there are some younger listeners that listen with us, but so you can read that. It'll be up to you as a parent if you want to read that to your child. I'm going to skip that, but terrible things are going to be happening, terrible things that happen in war, that are commonplace in war. Atrocities are committed, and so that's what verse 16 is describing. Verse 17, look, I am stirring up the Medes against them, who cannot be bought off with silver, and who have no desire for gold. Their bows will cut young men to pieces, and they will have no compassion on little ones, and they will not look with pity on children. And Babylon, the jewel of the kingdoms, the glory of the pride of the Chaldeans, will be like Sodom and Gomorrah when God overthrew them. And of course, those are the cities that God destroyed with fire and brimstone because of their wickedness. And so we have, and I'll pause for just a minute before we end. So really what we have, Babylon is a very specific civilization that existed, that conquered Israel, and that was conquered as God punishing them for what he did to the Israelites, although that was a part of his plan because Israel needed to be judged because of their own wickedness. But also Babylon is, we see repeated in the scriptures, even in the New Testament, Babylon is referred to as kind of the blanket civilization that is opposed to God. That's why the Tower of Babel is such a big deal. Because rebelling against God, when you do the exact opposite of what God tells you to do, you are choosing to be God's enemy. And so Babylon are all of those who have rejected Christ. They have rejected goodness. They have rejected the truth. They have rejected the genetic purity. You know, we see a lot of genetic warfare happening in the Old Testament with the Nephilim and the Anakim and the sons of God, or the angels, and humanity, and a lot of terrible evil child sacrifice things that are done to try to genetically damage humanity, which God created, humanity perfect and good. It's sin that has corrupted, our behavior as well as our genome. There's a whole thing with that, which I not necessarily wanting to get all into that today. But all that to say that Babylon is a reflection of that nation that has turned its back towards God. And so that's why today I am likening it to the American empire. And I say that very specifically because I do think there was a time when America was a very pure republic, and that we had the best interests of our people as well as the world at heart. That has changed for some season, and we have done some evil things, and so have become like Babylon. And so perhaps now, and this is a point of prayer for you as a believer, perhaps now is the time that God will bring judgment upon Babylon, and is bringing judgment upon Babylon, and that we as a nation will repent and turn back to God, and will be repented and mournful of our sin and our iniquity and the evil lifestyles that we have set up to be to have value, and that we can now have the opportunity and the freedom to reject those things, and usually those opportunities are fleeting. Just like in Ukraine, Ukraine was a former Soviet republic that in 1991 declared independence. And from that point until 2014, that was it. That was the only time that they had for missionaries to come into Ukraine and for Ukraine to become something different than just part of a communist socialist dictatorship, or oligarchy, I guess more accurately. And so they had such a limited time. And I would too say that we have a limited time. There is a limited opportunity here for us to, as Americans, to turn things around, to not just sit around and wait for someone else to do it, but to ourselves be a part of making that difference, to get involved in the lives of people in our culture and things that are happening, and to be a voice, not a voice of chaos and rage, but a voice of justice, a voice of meaningful argument and meaningful contribution, and to serve and to help those who are in need. That is a responsibility that we have to actively take on. It will never be, going on verse 20, it will never be inhabited or lived in from generation to generation, and a nomad will not pitch his tent there, and shepherds will not let their flocks rest there. But desert creatures will lie down there, and owls will fill the houses. Ostriches will dwell there, and wild goats will leap about. Hyenas will howl in the fortresses, and jackals in the luxurious palaces. Babylon's time is almost up. Her days are almost over. Now, historically, what we know, and have you ever fact-checked the Bible? Well, you should, because that's how you can be encouraged to know that it is the truth. I fact-checked that, and I looked at pictures of modern-day Babylon, and it is in ruins. Its walls are just rubble. Its buildings are no longer inhabitable. No one lives there. It is a desert place, and it is it is amazing that God's word is true, and it constantly is shown to be true. And it is amazing that God's promises and prophecies that He said things that would happen have happened. And so, what was once one of the, if not the greatest nation on earth, is now rubble and abandoned. And we watch shows like World War Z and other shows that show the collapse of the United States. They show the desolation of our land, and we think, well, it's fiction and it's never going to happen. Everything's going to go on like it always has, and that's because we have normalcy bias, which is a psychological condition that most people have, especially in a first world country. But guys, it can happen. If America does not stay this course and turn back to the Lord, we will be like Babylon. I can promise you that, because God's word always is true. And so I want to encourage you today that things are looking good. Be encouraged. There are some really positive things that are happening, but it comes with a catch. It comes with a call to responsibility. It calls with a call to be a part of that solution. You can't just think that the president and others, the Avengers, are going to solve everything. The nation was founded on the idea that we, the people, are the ones that are the movers and shakers of this great land. And once again, the opportunity for that to occur is upon us. What will we do with that responsibility? How will we be? Will we be like Babylon, and will we go our own way and do those things that are wicked in God's sight? Or will we repent like Israel, and will we be the remnant, and will we come back and establish once again a great nation under God? That remains to be seen. That's the challenge. We'll continue to talk more about this this spring. Thank you so much for your time being a part of this first episode. As always, if you have questions or comments, please leave them below, or reach out to me if you'd like. Send me a PM, contact us in some way. Be happy to engage with you. Hope that you are blessed. Let me close us in a word of prayer, and we will end this episode. Lord, we are thankful, so thankful for the way that you have worked in our lives, worked in the life of our nation. We thank you for the opportunities that are upon us. God, I pray that we would have a heart of repentance, that we would have a heart of determination to do your work and to do your will, and to be faithful to stand out and to be set apart for the work that you've called us to for such a time as this. And God, I pray a blessing on those that are listening, on those families, Lord, that you would provide for them, that you would help them through these challenges, that you would give them the courage to stand up and live according to your purposes, to be a nation that is ruled by law and not by mob, and not by the current philosophy of whatever's popular or whatever we see on TV or listen to in the music, but that God, that we would be the remnant, and that we would bring and usher in another great season of prosperity and a season of godliness in our nation. And I pray that you would help us to have the courage to be a part of that solution, God. I pray that you would bless our church. I pray that you would bless those that are not believers that are listening today, Lord, that they might come to know you through these truths, God. We just thank you for your faithfulness. We thank you for your blessing, the privilege that it is to live in such a great nation. And Lord, we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you guys so much. I'll let you know. I'll keep you updated on Sadie and let you know what's going on there. When the weather gets nicer, maybe we can walk around a little bit, see the chickens, see some things that are going on, see the orchard. We've got an orchard. This will be our second year of having the orchard. Maybe we'll get to bear some fruit, no pun intended, this year. So thank you guys so much. Take care. We'll see you soon.